Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever in the world you may be joining us from today. My name is Francesco Del Carpio, and I am the CFA York Operations Coordinator. I would like to officially open the sixth and final session in our Localizing the Canadian Supply Chain, Understanding Sector-Specific Impacts on U.S. Tariffs speaker series, presented in partnership with York Region. I would like to begin today with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and recognize that many Indigenous nations have longstanding relationships with the territory upon which our campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. The area is known as Takaranto and has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that the territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. As this is an online event, our participants may be joining from various locations, so I strongly encourage you to learn about the traditional land upon which you are located. With this, I welcome our moderator, our speakers, and our participants from around the world. Welcome to our webinar. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator today, Janet Song. With expertise in community development, business leadership, and strategic operations, Janet is committed to driving meaningful impact. Previously, as Senior Operations Lead at the Canadian Urban Institute, she helped administer the $15 million My Main Street grant program to support business growth in Southern Ontario. Previously, as Executive Director of the Prince Rupert and District Chamber of Commerce, she championed economic development for over 250 businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. She also revitalized immigrant services at Hecate Strait Employment Development Society, launching a community garden, public farmers market plans, and large-scale job fairs. Her passion for social impact and sustainability is reflected in her work with organizations like the United Nations Global Compact Network Canada, Public Inc., and the Canadian Cancer Society. With a strong track record in project management, event coordination, and community engagement, she continues to drive economic growth, sustainability, and inclusive development. Janet, thank you so much for moderating today's session and your ongoing help in putting this whole series together. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Francesco. So thank you for joining me on this journey of learning about the impact of tariffs into different sectors in the Canadian economy. And just to start off with some housekeeping rules for an engaging session. As you know, this session is recorded and shared on YouTube, the CFL York YouTube afterwards. We encourage diversity of thought that's respectful and courteous. And the ways to engage include the chat box. Feel free to introduce yourself, your organization, which part of the world you're in. And there's a Q&A section that you can ask, and then we'll answer that in the last 30 minutes of the session. And finally, in our roundtable session, in the last 30 minutes, please raise your hand and we would love to hear your voice to join the conversation, a comment on your community, how it's impacted, what you see, or questions that you just want to ask live. We hope to follow up with a post-event summary and shared resources that will be emailed to attendees. And finally, if you attended 50% of the sessions, you get a certificate of completion from CFAL York. So, a little bit about this speaker series, Localizing the Canadian Supply Chain and Understanding Sector-Specific Impacts on the U.S. Tariffs. We have shared this series from April to June, and we look sector by sector on tariff impacts on Canadian supply chains, which include automotive manufacturing, agriculture and fisheries, energy, critical minerals, food and beverage manufacturing, and finally, forestry, wood, construction. And we feature key insights from industry experts. And the goal and objective of this series is for us all to understand our Canadian sectors impacted by tariffs that seem to move something new every different day, but it helps us grow stronger and plan ahead. It also helps, we hope this session will also help you analyze the impact of tariffs, discuss policy and trade responses, and finally, learn live from industry experts. And the intended outcome is for us to co-create together. We will have a summary of resources shared after each session, and we encourage you to share your resources too in the chat or live in the roundtable session. And finally, at the end of it all, I hope to provide you with a supply chain resiliency strategy guide for businesses. And Key updates from last session. As of today, there has been no new tariff increases from our last session 2 weeks ago. So, the key thing that I do want to note is that it's so important for businesses to plan for the next year. Many of the key sector items are CUSMA exempt, which means if I believe around 70% of the products made is made in North America and Mexico, it is exempt. And then there will be a review on that agreement in July 1st, 2026, where everything may change. So it's so important to diversify and build resiliency in supply chains now. And one key item, since we're talking about wood and forestry, is that there is a planned raised duty from 14.54% to 34.5% duty. Basically, when Canada sells wood to the US, there is a duty paid by the Canadian wood producer on softwood lumber used to build houses, for example, the structural frame. And that's something important to note because it means that investments that are being made into the US cost more. And if you add tariffs on top of that, it really impacts the competitiveness of our of Canada products, wood products going to the US. And a quick overview before we give it to our speakers is understanding a little bit more of that Canadian wood and forestry sector. It's the fifth largest Canadian export industry. It's 5% of all Canadian exports, amounting to $37 billion. And our wood tackles national challenges like housing affordability, rural development and employment, emissions reductions, and wildfire resiliency. So it's so important to keep this sector running and running well. And speaking of which, we have workforce transformation experts in this room where with the economic and wildfire pressures, it could lead to 49 mill closures and 8,700 job losses in 10 years. And three key main forestry industry subsectors include solid wood product manufacturing, pulp and paper product manufacturing, and forestry and logging. So here's the agenda for today's session. And I would love to introduce our speakers, starting with Kelly Cooper. She's the founder and president of the Center of Social Intelligence and powerhouse behind the Free to Grow in Forestry movement. She brings a bold vision for inclusive, resilient forestry, one where workplace culture is the competitive advantage. From gender diversity to global trade, she connects the dots between people, policy, and performance. And as the author of Lead the Change and the upcoming The Emboldened Warrior, Kelly explores how inclusive leader is reshaping Canada's forestry sector and why it matters for your bottom line. Next, I want to introduce to you Haley Quiquero. She is the structural engineer and technical manager at the Canadian Wood Council's Woodworks Ontario program with deep expertise in mass timber, fire safety, sustainable design. She's helped to shape affordable, high performance housing and is a fierce advocate for timber as the future for our built environment. And finally, we have Mark Holland, who is a seasoned researcher for Unifor National, Canada's largest private sector union, representing over 320,000 workers. With deep expertise in market labor analysis, bargaining, and policy strategy, Mark explores the real-world impact of will explore the impacts of tariffs on workers, communities, and the future of Canadian forestry. Thank you for being here. And please add more because I'm going to ask you all a question. And starting with Kelly to share about your current work that you're doing a little bit more beyond the introduction that I'm given because yeah, you know your work best and it's so good to just hear about your work and if there's anything that has an impact on tariffs, an overview.
Okay, thanks, Janet. So yeah, I'm the president of the Center for Social Intelligence, and for the last, as it relates to the forest sector in particular, I've been spearheading an initiative called Free to Grow in Forestry. And it was always intended to increase the number of women in senior roles and technical positions in the forest sector, as well as all other underrepresented people. So over the course of the last 6, 7 years, we've been really working collaboratively across the sector, I would say as a social ecosystem, to bring the supply chain folks along with big industry to work as a system, recognizing that the workforce flows between these two worlds, or could if it's managed well. And the example I often used was, if you start out as a tree planter, as a woman, and that experience goes well, then you're more likely to want to stay in the forest sector. But if it does not go well, as unfortunately some of the statistics have shown us, you may be less likely to be joining the forest sector. So we need to think a bit bigger picture about how the workforce can flow and attract and retain key talent that ultimately, with diverse thoughts, create better decisions, better business outcomes. So I've been working in that space for the last, like I say, since 2018. Along the way, I wrote a book called Lead the Change, The Competitive Advantage of Gender Diversity and Inclusion. And it really is speaking to the C-suite about why, like what the value proposition is for diversity of thought at the top and in decision-making positions, and then gives them a blueprint for how to take action. And that is a very effective tool for what we're trying to do, is shift the workplace culture to be more welcoming of everyone. Currently, when we started out with Free to Grow, it was about 17% women in the sector. Now it's shifted to just 19%. Small incremental improvements, but still an improvement nonetheless. If I were to compare to other sectors in the natural resource sectors, they're not moving the needle. Like it's a tough thing to change the workplace culture. So anyway, I will stop there, but let's just say that there's a lot of work to do in the workforce space. We are making some headway. And I think we need to look at it in a holistic way as a social ecosystem in order to really retain the people. It's one thing to attract them. We have 50% of women coming out of programs. Male-female gender split is equal pretty much. But we have statistics showing us that within the first 5 years, women often leave the sector. That's workplace culture stuff. So that's what we're trying to address and continue to make movement on as we go forward.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for bringing to light that the people really matter into the industry as well. And I'm gonna check in with Mark from Unifor to add a little bit about his work in the forestry sector.
Thanks a lot, Janet. It's a pleasure to join everyone today. So Unifor, just a little bit more background. We represent, as Janet said, 320,000 members in different sectors across the country. Within forestry, we represent about 24,000 forestry workers in communities from coast to coast, in pretty much every segment of the forestry sector, and our members, are really going through it right now. We talk about the forestry sector was already sort of facing this perfect storm of adverse conditions. The softwood lumber duties, going up to 34+% is obviously a huge problem for the sector. But there's all sorts of other problems around wildfires and insect kills. So it's an industry that was already facing a lot of significant challenges before the U.S. government's kind of aggressive trade war that caused us all so much trouble. So one thing to note is that, as Janet said, a lot of the forestry products are exempt thanks to being CUSMA compliant. The biggest challenge right now in the sector is the threat of tariffs coming. Trump ordered an investigation into the softwood sector, specifically the Canadian softwood sector, and we're expecting some reports back by November of this year. And around that time, we could see tariffs of people are expecting anywhere 25%. Who knows the exact number? But if you stack that on top of a 34% softwood duty, that's a fatal, really, level of duty and combined tariff that will cause devastation in the broader forestry sector. And so it's something that we're all obviously very focused on. Within the labor market itself, since we're talking about the workforce, the forestry sector's really had a structural decline in employment levels over 20 years, but has really been stable for the past 8 years or so. And weirdly, although there's been a lot of fears of mill closures and layoffs and curtailments, there are still a lot of workplaces that are actually struggling to find workers. And so that ties in with what Kelly was saying around this weird situation where there's a sense of pervasive job loss, but actually a lot of individual employers are looking for workers. They're desperate for skilled trades workers and drivers and others. And so certainly anything that opens up those employment opportunities to more people is a good idea. So we're very supportive of her work. More generally, in terms of our promotion of a tariff strategy, as a union, we really believe that in this case, especially, the best defense is a good offense. Janet was talking about being forward-looking and planning ahead. For us, rather than just imposing retaliatory tariffs in kind of a tit-for-tat program with the U.S. government, we need to do more. And so we've been really pushing for a national home building strategy that connects Canada's housing crisis with a working Canadian forest, so that we have Canadian forestry workers responsibly and sustainably harvesting wood, and then workers taking that wood, processing it, working with it, making engineered components, modular parts for homes, moving it all the way down the supply chain to the actual assembly of homes. I don't want to steal Haley's thunder here, but we're from a worker perspective, we're very, very supportive of that kind of approach to a home building plan. We're glad the federal government is on board and lots of industry players are on board, because the whole goal is to create more domestic demand for wood products. It employs more forestry workers, it employs more construction workers, it uses Canadian wood here in Canada. It's kind of like an all-around win, and it would, even if the tariffs weren't happening, it would still have been a good idea. And that's the kind of cool thing about it. This is what we should be doing anyway, is improving and expanding the domestic market, and then also separately using our experience in technology then to promote those products and technologies around the world into new markets, and not being so reliant on the US. Right now, out of all the wood products we export globally, 77 or so percent of those wood products go to the US, which is a really dangerous reliance on a single trading partner, which we've seen is not in our best interest anymore. So I'll leave that for now, but I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Mark. You really set the stage about what Haley does, because Woodworks Ontario is really promoting Canadian wood. So, Haley, could you share about your current work?
Yeah, thank you. No thunder stealing, Mark. That's a perfect lead in. So thanks for the setup. Yeah, so I'm the technical manager at Woodworks Ontario. I come from the construction sector, so I am a structural engineer by trade, and so coming from the construction side of things, I got involved with Woodworks, which the mission really is to promote the use of Canadian wood products in domestic construction. So we're right at home talking about this topic. We're part of the Canadian Wood Council, which is really a program that was formed over 65 years ago to represent our membership of lumberboards and wood product producers across the country. And so we represent their interests in the construction industry by advancing regulations and through really the building codes and standards that we work with in the construction industry to advance the market opportunity for wood and really ensuring that market access. And then we also bring those code advancements to the industry through resources and education, and really trying to promote and show the industry where you can use wood in construction, why you should use it, and reducing any barriers there are to wood construction adoption in the country. So I represent the Ontario region, and we have regional programs that are boots on the ground all the way across the country. So we're kind of in the market trying to understand where are those barriers and opportunities for wood construction on a regional basis, and yeah, really kind of use our connections and network of wood experts in construction to advance the adoption of that. So when we're talking about building strong domestic supply chains and demand for wood products in Canada, that's what Woodworks has been all about since our inception in the 90s. And as Janet and Mark mentioned too, the softwood lumber industry is no stranger to duties. So we've been working towards creating that domestic market, and there's been some shifts over the last couple of years. And obviously, with the housing crisis top of mind, there's lots of talk about the opportunity for wood construction. And I think I can probably talk a bit later about some of the details of those regulatory shifts over the last couple of years that have been opening up that market. But maybe I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. It's good to set the stage of what's going on, and let's bring it back to the tariff levels. As we know, tariffs have not hit this sector yet, but it will lead to a major impact into this market, well, especially, well, this sector, if it does occur. So, how will this potential threat lead to your plans for your operations in the work that you do? Curious from Mark's end, because layoffs seem to be the biggest thing we hear all the time when people hear threats. How is Unifor dealing with the threat of tariffs?
Yeah, I mean, we've been dealing with it. Our union represents, like I said, workers in 25 plus sectors. And so we represent tens of thousands of auto workers, aluminum workers, all sorts of people in different sectors. And in some ways, the challenges and the solutions are similar. So on one hand, what we've been urging the federal government to do and promoting in the provinces as well is set up programs that will support laid off workers, those who are affected by tariffs immediately. If you're a forestry worker and you get laid off because your employer is worried about the looming threat of tariffs and they close a facility, you need financial support immediately. Like you need to put food on the table, you need to pay your rent or your mortgage, you need money now. So we need those support programs quickly. They need to be nimble, flexible, and fast. Um, then also there will be some smaller employers and maybe even larger ones that will require a certain amount of liquidity supports in the short term if there are disruptions to the supply chain. We need to think really strategically about how to keep, we keep saying this, keep producers producing and workers working. And sometimes that might mean some targeted, very, very carefully conditioned financial supports for employers, though that can be politically a controversial proposal, but it's much easier for the government to help support employers in the short term, then see them all disappear. And then the economic and financial impacts in the long term are much more intense and serious and difficult to resolve. So separately from that, though, we're really trying to urge employers to keep producing, to keep working. We don't want to see employers close down and try to move equipment and materials to the US. We don't want to see a sort of drain of capacity and production to the US. So that's another big factor. And as we've said, we're always looking for other opportunities to promote Canadian wood products and create new markets. One of our big calls really is for a national strategy, like more high-level coordination. So, and even locally, we need things like building codes and zoning regulations and land use planning rules to work together much more from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because then we create a much more seamless supply chain, and that trip from the forest to a constructed home is a lot easier. We need to address the housing crisis. We need to support Canadian forestry. So we see there being a lot of pieces moving together to do that.
Yeah, thank you for providing just a really lovely systemic overview of, point A from the log to the house, and how can we simplify that, and how can we support the humans, the humans that work at it and the humans who live in these houses And speaking of humans, I want to bring it to Kelly. I know that threats are huge, especially towards underdeserved community groups, especially if many of them are working part-time jobs or like, I'm not sure. Please paint us a picture of how are tariff threats impacting your line of work, such as the Free to Grow initiative, Kelly.
Okay, so I guess it's not so much the tariffs directly, but it's the whole cloud around the topic of DEI that has definitely impacted Canada. That's come from the States. So we found a huge shift immediately when Trump got into power. People just stopped the brake, like put on the brakes with a lot of initiatives that were going on regarding DEI. So that went cold pretty quick. Mark's talking about a strategy, national strategy. I think we need a strategy as well for the workforce aspect of this work. And we need to have people employable across boundaries. Foresters, they have to now, I think, get meet different requirements to go to different provinces. So we need to break that barrier down. And I think we need to have supports for training so that the mental health piece. I think there's a ton of people, frankly, who are struggling out of COVID and being hit with this economic conversation who are really suffering. So we need to have that awareness about how do we have some supports in place for folks in general, but then also the retooling of training that often happens with downturns in the economy. I'm a proponent, obviously, of the social intelligence arm of training, so that we have a workforce or an organization that you're working in that accepts and respects others, no matter if they're Indigenous or a woman or what have you. And we have a workplace culture where there is those supports in place. And right now, we really don't see that. And we need to strengthen that muscle. And I'd say across the country. So that's what I would like to see. I would love to see a strategy on that we actually increase the capacity of individuals. And Free to Grow created some training, actually, that is available at the site. It's another tool you can use to help people get out of the starting blocks, as I call it. So it positions the whole context within sustainable development. So 30 years ago, we were educating corporate on why they had to pay attention to the environment and the value of doing so. And now, 30 years later, we're working on the social side of sustainable development and explaining the value of the people and how that contributes to the bottom line. And that completes the sustainable development, economic development cycle that we want to have in the future. So it sets it in that context. People start connecting the dots a little bit better. They don't push it off as, oh, that's a UN sustainable development goal. I don't really care. It actually takes you from the UN SDGs to corporate boardroom tables to the individual on what can that individual do to take action and make it better. What can I do to learn how to be more capable in this space so that I can deliver what I need to for the organization and for myself. So that's what I'd like to see. All those components, I think, are a big piece of being hand in glove with the work that's required on the economic side, like on the parts that Mark was talking about. We need that workforce strategy across the country in tandem to support the companies and the individuals.
Yeah, I think that it's so important, especially when there's threats going on economically. It's important for foundational pieces internally of companies to be strong to weather storms, and seeing people as humans and not disposables are very important. And it comes from a perspective of having people feel valued and showing that and really speaking to what you do through the actions you do in your company. And now we're going to shift gears in terms of more on hearing the voice of many wood producers or wood businesses from Haley. I want to hear, since Woodworks Ontario is made up of such a huge association, a big associations of wood producers. I want to hear what have they been saying in terms of the tariff threat?
Yeah, it's definitely market access in Canada is the biggest topic that we kind of get into in my line of work, and I think this idea of like standardizing access for wood products in the built environment is definitely a topic that comes up a lot across many aspects of construction, but it's something that we're certainly looking at. There's lots of push from all levels of government right now to remove some of those barriers and really help with market access to across jurisdictions for wood construction products. So that's really great. I think even on the construction side of things, the specifiers, the decision makers in the built environment in the construction world they're also asking us, what are the impacts of these tariffs on wood as a building material, and obviously in the context of other building materials being perhaps subject or not subject to tariffs, it kind of complicates the whole construction ecosystem, and decisions that might normally have defaulted one way to using certain building materials are now in question. So we're definitely kind of leaning into that momentum to starting to question what building material is best for my project in this environment of uncertainty, and really that's coming down to this same mentality of buy Canadian and buy local, and so we're able to promote wood as a local renewable material, and kind of maybe have those benefits that we've been promoting resonate a little bit more in the current environment and climate. So and at the same time, we've been able to really push forward and progress regulations that have like the building code that has historically been quite restrictive around the use of wood as a construction material. We've been able to really progress those codes. Some of the provinces like BC and Ontario have expedited the update of the Ontario and BC provincial building codes ahead of the national cycle, because they see the urgency in really allowing for more wood to be used in different types of buildings and bigger buildings, and to support our forest economy. So just since January 1st, the Ontario Code has been updated from 12 stories to 18 stories of tall of certain types of buildings that are allowed to be built out of wood now. So when you think of wood construction, we often think about single family homes, and over 90% of single family homes are built out of wood. We need to definitely continue building more single family homes. But where we're also really excited about being able to expand into is this multifamily world of mid-rise and high-rise. Maybe not necessarily the high-rise you're used to thinking about in Toronto of like 50 plus stories, but where wood can really play in that kind of 7 to 18 story range is the type of housing we need in jurisdictions across the country. So really thinking about that housing continuum and how we can allow builders to choose wood if it works for their project, because those regulations have progressed, is something that I think can have a not insignificant impact on the Canadian supply chain, and kind of creating a more robust or a more strong demand for Canadian wood products in our local construction sector.
Thanks, Haley. I really do hope that we do choose more made in Canada wood into the the buildings we build. And speaking of builders, and like I think that in this whole sector, we need more tradespeople. We need more people in general to make sure that we have people building, we have people using wood, we have people cutting the wood. It's just the whole process. And I wanted to check in. Well, first with Mark, on like how can the sector better attract and retain these skilled workers to build that momentum, because we can't ever use this wood if we don't have people using the wood. So hearing from you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very good question. I think one of the challenges that the forestry sector in Canada faces is kind of a PR marketing problem. I think that there's a real false but pervasive sense that forestry is like sort of a sunset sector of the economy, that it's fading, that there won't be forestry workers in 20 years. And so for young people, I think it's safe to argue that a lot of folks don't see it as a viable career path for them, and that's patently false. That it's clear. I mean, there are new and cool wood products being developed in a ton of different ways: construction, energy, all sorts of cool chemical products that we'll use that are sustainable. And so it is still a very much a viable industry that will be with us for some time. But unfortunately, I think there are too many folks who don't see it as a place for them. That part of that is about that false sense of the industry. Part of it is what Kelly got towards around diversity and the sort of structural problems there around the workplace. But I think I think those are some of the main things that we need to be promoting is just it's a place for young people. It's a place for different people. There's lots of great jobs. It's also if it's a higher than average a unionized sector, and so workers get pretty good pay. They have good benefits. They have pensions. They have drug and dental plans for themselves and their families, and that's especially important because one thing we haven't touched on yet is that a lot of, at least from our end, not from the construction side where we're building where the people are, but from the forestry side in the back end, the beginning end, a lot of the work is being done in rural Canada, and the people are living in rural communities. And so when the forestry sector thrives, rural Canada thrives. And when the forestry sector is struggling, there are hundreds of forestry dependent communities across Canada that struggle, and people, regular people, and the people that own the coffee shop in the small town struggle. That it's this knock-on effect of secondary and tertiary jobs. And so that's a big thing. I think the tie-in with the tariffs, to go back to that, is that when there's a threat of tariffs, even a threat of tariffs, we see a total standstill in investment. And when there's a standstill in investment, that's where everyone's in kind of a holding pattern. People aren't being hired into positions, and it keeps stalling the labor market and the whole process of folks entering into the system. And so it's already a struggle, but the tariffs are sort of making it worse in terms of that capital investment into the sectors.
And yes, I'm going to bring it to Kelly because training matters. I think if people are trained, they can do so much more. So Kelly, please share about your perspective in this.
Well, I just want to build off what Mark said. So I think that he's absolutely right. The PR piece is important. And I guess where I'm seeing it is that people see the forest sector in a traditional light, lumberjacks and so forth. They also see it as deforestation. Whereas I think we need to spin it to it's helping address climate change. We need these positive spins to the sector that I don't think we get the message out enough. And I think that's where I know for women, that's where they feel just naturally they want to contribute to that positive outcome. So that's a real drawing card. I think to build off what Mark said as well about the tariffs, what it creates, I think, is just instability, right? And then people are like, that might not be the best sector to go in because look at all the tumultuous stuff. I could lose my job, so people get a little hesitant with that. And then the third thing is immigration. So we need immigration in this country, right? Because we're not producing enough. We produce less than 2 people per couple. So we have an issue there. And so we're bringing in more immigration, but it's being met with resistance. Now, could there be a better strategy on maybe the immigration policies on who's coming in? Could there be a softer landing on some of these things? Perhaps, but we have what we have. And so we need to be open-minded. We need to be, again, back to the training, understanding this is an employment benefit. This is a Canadian benefit. This is not something to ostracize folks from. This is something to embrace folks into. So we actually have this country running as an engine, an economic engine. But the more we distance from that, the more we try and say, hey, this and that. And this goes with Indigenous peoples as well, who've been here longer than us. We still have this dynamic. but we need to open our minds and see that these folks are what we need in order to create the economic engine in this country that we are trying to create. So when we have these big natural resource projects on the radar right now, right at the forefront, we have to have the workforce strategy hand in glove, in my mind. And that is a part of this, is this whole training that we do at CSI, at Center for Social Intelligence, and we have created for the Free to Grow in Forestry. This is the beginning. It's not the mecca, but it certainly helps people who currently feel, I don't care and I don't want to know, get those guys in, because a lot of those guys are the decision makers. Get them taking that training. Everybody who's taken it as in those roles has been like, oh wow, that was, now I understand. They understand it's not the flavor of the month. They know it's a bigger picture that started 5 years ago with our common future, and all the work that happened with the UN. It's all just playing out. And when we recognize we have a role to play within that piece of that puzzle, we get engaged. And we want to make a contribution to that positive outcome that we are all working toward.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I think this training should be made more broadly. I think of, connecting with universities, perhaps. I don't know, like starting them young. I think of University of Northern British Columbia in Prince George, which is the largest hub of wood. I guess it's the hub where like wood is developed and produced, and having that training available there in the heart of it all, where companies are there and their future employees are there, and they just recognize that. But I also wanted to bring it back to Haley. Like, what have you been hearing in terms of, they're talking about PR, they're talking about the marketing piece, they're talking about the worker piece. What have you been hearing on your end?
Yeah, I certainly see a lot of kind of similarities in the construction workforce, the challenges that the industry faces as well. I totally agree with what you're saying about training and the PR story as well. But I do think the construction workforce has also faced challenges of constrained labor pool, and there's the phrase of, for every one skilled trade worker that's coming into the market, 5 are retiring. So there's this common kind of feeling in the construction industry and fear of, what are we going to do when we have all of these kind of workers leaving the industry, and there's a big push towards improving construction productivity and prefabrication, when we're talking about all of these kind of strategies that the country is trying to implement to address our housing shortage and shrinking labor market. And when we're talking about wood construction and prefabrication, a lot of these components are being built in factory settings. So it's kind of looking at really changing the way that construction labor is done. And when it's done in a factory, it's a cleaner environment, it's safer, it's often leveraging different types of machinery and robotics that make it maybe less labor intensive and potentially more attractive to a wider employment base. So, certainly to echo Kelly's work, the construction industry is, also faces challenges of diversity of workers. And with such a shrinking labor force, it's important to be able to hire and retain as much talent as possible. And so this shift towards factory built really helps to level the playing field a little bit, and create a shift in worksite culture that might have this kind of reputation, that might deter different subsets of people from working in that realm. So I think there's a good opportunity to also diversify and strengthen our workforce in construction as a part of this whole movement towards increasing our Canadian wood product manufacturing and adding value in Canada and creating those jobs both in the factories and in housing production.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we're talking to our audience about this as well, whether you are an economic development officer, whether you are a planner, or just people in these spaces where we're building. It's like, what are we building? What are the materials that you build? And you want your community to thrive, but you have no one to work there or no one to build, or it's so constrained. There's so much demand, but not enough supply, and it just leads to halts and waits and all of that. So now I want to ask, so Jayesh asked a question. Uh, could the speaker share some thoughts on what role can foreign direct investment or innovation clusters play in future-proofing the Canadian lumber industry against geopolitical and trade-related risks? Does anyone want to give a stab at that in terms of future-proofing the Canadian lumber industry, FDI,
Oh,
innovation?
I have things to say on this subject.
Oh, Marco.
So, I mean, innovation clusters, I think, as we've said, I think it'll need investment, it'll need capital. The problem, as we've said, is that the forestry sector is struggling for capital and for investment of this kind. But innovation hubs, we're always looking for new things to do with wood, because it is, if it's managed properly, a sustainable resource, and that's a big if. But so to be clear, but if it's managed properly, it's a sustainable resource. There's lots of interesting new things that we can be doing with wood and wood products. So definitely the idea of innovation clusters that do that kind of cool R&D work is very, very useful and helpful. In terms of foreign investment, I think that one of the things we haven't talked about is the problem of corporate consolidation in the sector. Because it has faced a lot of challenges, the forestry sector, not on the construction side, but on the certainly on the pulp and paper side and the mill side, there are fewer companies owning more individual workplaces, and that's not always great, to be honest. I don't think that, for our union, there's nothing inherently wrong with foreign investment. Certainly in the auto sector, for instance, Ford, is a foreign-owned company that employs lots of Canadian workers and supports Canadian families. We like that. I think that the same is true for the forestry sector. The specific challenge in the forestry sector, though, is around what work is being done here in the sector. What we don't want to become is basically a resource source for international companies that basically treat Canada as a tree farm, where they take our wood, ship it overseas, do all that secondary and tertiary economic activity to the product, and then we buy it back from them at a much higher cost. We want to do that work here. We want to do that secondary and tertiary economic work on the wood here in Canada as much as possible, so that we are benefiting from that economic productive activity. We're employing Canadian workers from coast to coast. Their families they get access to all the benefits of all those workers, all those good things that we do. And so foreign investment, I think, fine. Investment, good. But I think what we need to see is that forestry activity and the productive activity happening here. We want to not be shipping raw logs to other places where they make the money doing cool stuff with it. That would be, I think, our position on that subject.
Yeah, if I can add to that, I 100% agree. For sure, that's where we see the biggest investment opportunity and advancement opportunity in Canada is really expanding our ability to manufacture these secondary and tertiary wood products and keep them in our domestic construction market. We have CMHC and the government's setting housing targets to double our rate of housing productivity every year. We're building less than 250,000 homes a year right now, and we need to be up around 500,000 homes a year to reinstate housing affordability levels. And not to mention all of the kind of accessory community infrastructure that goes along with those houses. So schools and, libraries, community centers, all of those additional infrastructures that can really be built. A lot of this can be built with Canadian wood products. And as Mark alluded to, when we have sustainable forestry and harvesting practices in Canada, we still have lots of room to grow that fiber supply and use it locally. Where we're a bit constrained right now, it really is that in that manufacturing of advanced wood products in Canada. We have a lot of really great manufacturers of engineered wood products and prefabricated wood components in Canada, but there's so much demand that can be filled with more of those producers if we're, again, aiming to double our construction year after year. We've seen a lot of investment just over the last year in expanding or creating new manufactured wood product facilities, and there's definitely room for more. I know the province of Ontario, for example, is really kind of advocating, and they released an action plan earlier this year to really stimulate and incentivize advanced wood construction methodologies, products, bringing new innovative bioeconomy products to market. So there's a big push right now to incentivize and stimulate that kind of manufacturing in Ontario, especially where we have a deep history of manufacturing in our economy, and kind of looking at bringing together our manufacturing expertise in the south with our forest expertise in the north, combining that with this really, time-sensitive issue of building housing and improving our productivity. I think it's the perfect storm to stimulate that type of investment in manufacturing.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, just to jump in there, because I know our time is almost up, but I just think it's a great way for me to end what I would like to say to this whole hour, which is, although we have a lot of talk of the negative impacts from the US on Canada, what we're also getting in this last convo is the positive impact, because it's getting Canada getting its act together a little bit more. And it's become an incentive to be like, okay, we're very clear now. We want this to be in Canada. We don't want anybody else messing. We've all shown unity. And it's now breaking down by sector where that unity, and back to what I was saying, social ecosystem in my lens, we don't have time to muck about. Do you know what I mean? We don't have time for little politics. We have to get it together. And we have this opportunity now to shine in that light. We have a lot of geography. We have a lot of people. Yes, we're having to deal with the immigration conversation, but if we can just open our minds, as I talk about, be socially intelligent, increase the social intelligence of the country to be more receptive to, we need humans for this work. We need humans. Okay? Anyone can do this. We can train them. We're capable. So let's raise the bar, all boats float, get the social intelligence up to snuff. And we got a lot of assets here. We have a lot of assets, and the human part is a huge asset, but we're not maximizing it yet. We're not reaching the potential on that. So I think the US, as much as it's been a source of fear for a lot of folks, I think it's also given us a bit of a nudge in the right direction to get our act together in this fashion.
Thank you. I do want to open up to this time. Mark, Kelly, do you have anything else to add? And last future things, especially for small, medium-sized businesses in planning for the short and long run. Like, what do I do now? I think that's the biggest thing that we ask ourselves. We need humans, we need to train them, but what do I do as a business that's grappling with all of this? What do I do as an economic developer that's like, how do I support my community in building up the people? Yeah, just hearing any last final things as we wrap up.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add as a quick final thought from me. I think across all jurisdictions, levels of government, economic development, we need to be just really questioning our traditional construction methods in our communities and looking at, can we be using Canadian wood products instead of whatever we're traditionally using, and where can we use those best, and really supporting investment in our communities into new manufacturing and construction technology that can help us meet our construction targets and capitalize on this climate to really build those local supply chains.
Yeah, and I mean, from us, like just to echo what both Kelly and Haley have said, like the all the pieces are here, and that's really great. I mean, unfortunately, it took the chaotic circus-like threat of this weird trade war to sort of sharpen everyone's focus. But the pieces are here. There's an incredible amount of skill and expertise among the workforce. We need to do more to develop that workforce and make it more inclusive and diverse and bring in new young people especially. But the material is there, the skill level is there among the workforce, the know-how is there, and certainly there is so much demand in different ways as well, not just for lumber, but pulp and paper products, like it runs the gamut. Packaging, we have workers that work making box board and container board. There's demand for these products. We should be making all that stuff here, and we should be benefiting from all the things that making it here brings: economic activity, increased capacity, workforce development, all the good things that come from a successful, thriving sector. So it's too bad the tariffs are here in many ways, but it's hopefully we can take it and use it to springboard into a much more sustainable plan for the sector for the future.
Kelly, last words from your end.
Yeah, just last thought. I just want to say, in the context of diversity of trees are needed to have a strong forest. We all know that. But we're now saying, okay, we need diversity of products to strengthen that sector. We need diversity of trade in order to be resilient. And we need diversity of people in order to have innovative thinking and better business outcomes. So I think the takeaway is diversity is good, even though in the context of North America, people think it's not good. It is very good. And I think we have to get our heads around that and all that it includes.
Thank you. And I think just to wrap everything up in our last minute is it's so important to like find those partnerships that enable us to build Canadian. So looking into Indigenous communities and how like what are their economic development corporations doing? Do they have forestry? Asking like people in your community to see what do they have and how can we build it up. And that's the key thing of supply chain. The more we build Canadian, the more likely it is to have a fully made Canadian thing. That's how we build resiliency, to be part of the whole process. And it comes with the people and knowing the people and building that. So I really hope that this is a conversation that is the beginning, and it does not end, and we continue to forge this. Please do feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to make connections with our lovely speakers, Kelly, Mark, and Haley. Thank you so much for your time. And one more thing for us to just celebrate. If you have to go, you can, but I just want to share that we had just lovely time to just learn so much on the key things that make our economy move, from auto to what we eat in agriculture and fisheries, energy sector, mining, critical minerals, food and beverage, and finally wood. It's a full circle. Thank you for joining me, and we will send you some resources after, but have yourself a wonderful day, and thank you for
Thank you,
just
Janet.
no.
Thanks so much, Janet, for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you so much for that great panel session. Thanks to the audience for taking the time to join us all of these weeks. And I think Janet covered pretty much everything, but just as a reminder, everything is recorded and up on our YouTube. So if you ever want to go back and visit or share these sessions with anyone, please feel free to do so. I've shared the link to our YouTube in the chat. And yeah, thank you so much for a great series. Janet, thank you so much for helping us put the whole series together. And thank you. Just one last big thank you to everybody for taking the time to be here today. It was a great panel and a lot of fun to hear all of your perspectives and all of the work that you're doing. And thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Francesco. Thanks, Janet.